So that cannot be avoided. Relationships are a must, and Prabhupada says 99% of all the human beings will have to get married, or should be married. So it's not an easy thing to do, to get free of that. But this is a systematized way of doing it. That you go through all these different stages of human life, you know, through the varnas, the ashramas, but with the idea that ultimately you're coming to this point of giving it all up. Yeah. So you live it in such a way that you don't get too entangled. Yeah. Because we can't do it in the extreme way. It's like Prabhupada mentions the story about the sage that was living on the beach, and he was very hairy sage, and he'd been there a long time, so somebody advised him, why don't you build a cottage? And this man, he had a benediction that he would live one day of Brahma, I think it was, something like that, for every hair on his body. And he was a very hairy sage. So he was going to live a long time, let's say. But when he was asked, why don't you build yourself a cottage? Oh, why should I bother? I'm just here temporarily. So that mentality we have to have. That we can work within the world, we work within our families, we have duties to perform. You know, these all things should be taken very seriously. But with the intention that those that we're connected with will become aware of their spiritual nature, and that our own sense of being spiritual will also increase. It's like dealing with a fire. You can get hot or you can get burnt. So you have to deal with the material energy very, very carefully. Therefore, there's so many strictures, there's so much dharma, so much emphasis on right action. Because that right action is meant to come to the point of detachment. That's the whole point. Even in the householder community, the whole point is detachment. Not callousness, you know, not that we deliberately ignore the needs of others. That you have to do, that's duty. But at the same time, within oneself, one should be thinking of one's true spiritual nature. Then when the opportunity comes, that can be dissolved, that material bondage can be dissolved, and then we can fully dedicate our lives to developing our Krishna consciousness. So it's not an easy thing. Even a personality like Srila Prabhupada, that, you know, material situation. Not that Prabhupada was ever material, but apparently, you know, his family situation, very, very difficult to give up. Prabhupada was so determined to preach, and his family was so determined not to let him, or as long as he did it, and still keep supporting them. And Prabhupada told me there was one time in 1956, he was in Chandni Chowk in Delhi, he stopped to pet a calf, and the mother cow, she saw him and thought, you know, took him as an aggressor, so he was actually charged. He was gored by the cow. I don't know how serious it was, but it knocked him flat on his back. And Prabhupada told me, he said, when the cow hit me, he said, the first thing I thought of was, am I now being punished for leaving my family? He just more or less officially become Vanaprastha a couple of years before. But that was his first reaction, that I'm being punished for leaving my family. And then he said, but then I immediately thought about the 6 Goswamis and how they gave up everything for preaching Lord Chaitanya's message. He said, oh, then I was all right. So he had, but that was his immediate reaction. And he told me that, you know, this affection between husband and wife is so powerful, so strong. He said, even I sometimes think about my wife. So what to speak about as ordinary mortals. So Prabhupada, you know, he had practical experience of what it means to be married. He could show us, you know, the proper standard for that. But also, you know, it's all based on this idea of ultimate detachment. It must come to that. Otherwise, you're doomed to be in the material world again and again and again, repeat the same kinds of behaviors, and suffer the same results. I think Einstein said that madness is repeating the same thing again and again, but expecting a different result. That's one of the symptoms. So we're doing that, chewing the tube, that's called, in Bhagavatam, chewing the tube. Everybody's doing the same things, repeatedly getting the same result, and nobody learns their lesson. So at least in Vedic civilization, it's supposed to be based on intelligence, good discrimination. Prabhupada said that the standard of intelligence is the ability to discriminate between spirit and matter. That's what it means to be intelligent. So any intelligent society, they must figure out the solutions to the problems in life. We have so many problems, how to solve them. If you can't solve them, then how you can say you're intelligent? Real intelligence means you actually solve your problems. So there's no question of a material civilization being in any way intelligent. From Prabhupada's point of view, everybody's in the darkest regions of ignorance, because they so strongly identify with the body as being the only reality when it's changing right before the very eyes. But they don't want to see it. Just like my friend. He's known me for a long time. He knows I'm a devotee. He knows we have a solid philosophy. When his wife died, he could have contacted me, you know, how do I deal with this? I would have flown all the way to England to help him, if necessary, and preach to him. But he didn't. He'd rather stay in his pit of, you know, ignorance and suffering. And then, you know, when he does pop his head up, what does he do? He gets himself back in the same situation all over again. And if I try and tell him, you know, why are you repeating the same thing? You're going to suffer again. He'll get angry. No. You know, this is life. This bag of stool and blood that I've become attached to, and my own bag of stool and blood, and the bag of stool and blood that's my wife or, you know, children or whatever. No, this is it. This is all there is. Okay, then you have to suffer. What can be done? The material Vedic civilization is not meant for suffering. It's meant for curing the problems of life. That's based on real intelligence, how you should act in such a way that by the end of this lifetime, you've been through it all, you've given up all your attachments, false attachments and illusions, and you're fixed in your eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord. Then you have real happiness. So this is the further stage, after hearing about the duties of householders. Then, you know, now the Bhagavatam's telling us that the next thing is that whatever you've been doing, it's all temporary and you should be prepared to give it up. That's all. Just walk away from it all, if you can. So that needs training, it needs help. It needs the whole society to be supportive of that common goal. In Vedic civilization, you know, everybody had the same worldview. Just like nowadays, there's so much propaganda for this mechanistic worldview. People just absorb it automatically. They don't even question it, they don't think about it. Vedic civilization was similar, except that it was based on spiritual life. Everybody, every sector of society in Vedic Varnashram system was headed towards the same goal. They had the same understandings, and according to the capacity they would act. So the Brahmanas especially, it says here, householder life means attachment for one's wife, whereas sannyas means detachment from one's wife and attachment to Krishna. So sannyas generally is given to the Brahmins. They have sufficient intelligence, clarity of consciousness, that they can actually renounce all the material, you know, ties and walk away from them and not look back. So that's particularly meant for the Brahmins. The Kshatriyas, they were only advised to become Vanaprastha. Then the Vaishyas, mixture. They could either remain married or they could maybe sometimes become Vanaprastha. And the Shudras, no question of anything, you stay where you are. That's also Vedic civilization, that the Shudras don't renounce anything because they're not intelligent enough to do so. If you artificially renounce something, then, you know, if you don't have the intelligence to support your actions properly, then after some time all those feelings and desires will come flooding back, and then it'll cause a huge disturbance. So the Sudras, they're never advised to give up the family life. They stay where they are, but they continue serving, you know, the more intelligent sectors of society. The Vaishyas, because they're in a mixture of ignorance and passion, and some of them may come up to this Vanaprastha stage, but generally speaking not. But their advice, all right, purify yourself by whatever you've earned, all the material gain that you have, give it all away. Give it for the purpose of preaching Krishna consciousness. That will also be a level of detachment. Yeah, instead of becoming bound up by your material gains, recognize them for what they are, and then use them for some permanent purpose for preaching Krishna consciousness. The Kshatriyas, of course, very difficult for them also to become sannyasi. These are personalities that have been absorbed their whole lives in the politics and sociology and all the rest of it, of human society. So again, it's very easy to lose sight of the goal, and especially when you have a chance to get power. Yeah, that's the other great, allurement in material world, power. If you have a lot of power, then you can control and manipulate and increase your enjoyment. So the Kshatriyas are always dealing with this kind of thing. But they're also a little intelligent, and they listen to the Brahmanas. So their advice, all right, just vanaprastha. But the sannyas business, this is mainly for the Brahmanas. Yeah, one who has actually fully realized that I'm not this body, I'm the spirit soul. Then they can easily walk away. Not easily, it's not that easy. Even if we can walk away, the tendrils of attachment to material things and persons is very, very powerful. And they keep trying to, it's like an octopus. You're trying to get away and it's grabbing you from all directions. Even Srila Prabhupada, again, another, the best example. When he went back to India in 1970 to begin ISKCON's preaching there at the end of August, it was a sensation. There was press coverage when he arrived at the airport. There was a group of devotees from the Gaudiya Mat came to greet him. And Prabhupada was suddenly all over the newspapers and in all the TV and everything, all over India. That this Indian guru has now made so many foreigners as his disciples. So they were having all these big pandal programs, 20, 30,000 people a night were coming in Bombay, later on in Calcutta. What was one of the first things that happened to Prabhupada when he came back to India to start his official preaching of ISKCON? His family sent him a solicitor's letter, a lawyer's letter, basically telling him that actually you've abandoned the family, they're living in a very miserable condition, they're out on the street practically, due to your irreligiosity. You don't know what real religion is. Real religion means that you look after the family and blah, 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 and you've abandoned us like this in the most cruel and heartless way. How can you say you're a spiritual person? And so if you don't give us 3 lakhs of rupees, then we can make some very bad publicity about you. So it was a blackmail letter, basically. I know it was, actually the whole thing, I've read it, it was written by M.M. Day, Prabhupada's oldest active son, Mathura Mohan Day. And he always resented the fact that Prabhupada had taken sannyas. Because when you take sannyas in India, it means something. Legally you're dead, and there's no connection with the family anymore, at least legally. And so Mathura Mohan, being the eldest son, he was the middle child. The oldest child was Sulakshmana, the girl. Then there was Prayagraj, but he was crazy. He died early, actually, about the age of 30 on the streets of Calcutta because he went crazy. Then after that there was Mathura Mohan. Mathura Mohan is the one that Prabhupada writes about or mentions sometimes. He took him to Radhakund to see Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He said he was a beautiful child, very intelligent, always asking, Prabhupada uses the example of putting his finger in the fan and so many other things. And he was always asking, why is this? Why is that? What's this for? When they were in Radhakund, the sannyasis there, they kind of, took him as a pet boy. So he would go in to see Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and they would tell him, now go to Guru Maharaj, offer your dandabats, hold his feet, and beg for his mercy. He was about 4 or 5 at that time. So he went in and he grabbed hold of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's feet. Please, Guru Maharaj, give me your mercy. So he was a nice boy. But later on he got spoiled in his youth. Later in his late youth, he got involved with the communists a little bit. I heard something to do with the Naxalites. They were the people that were going around blowing everything up. So I don't know whether he was involved in that, but he became a bit radicalized. And Prabhupada said that his mother spoiled him. That was the problem. So when Prabhupada took sannyas, he was the eldest responsible son in the family, and that meant that the responsibility for the rest of the family came to him. That's the Indian system. Still even now it's like that. And he resented it. He was an intelligent guy, but he didn't like working either. And now he felt the burden that my father's just suddenly cut himself off, and we're left high and dry, and I'm the one that's got to look after them. So he always had that kind of resentment. And Prabhupada told me that when he took sannyas, he was living, half time at least in Delhi, and sometime in Vrindavan, Radha Damodar, and that Chippiwada area in Delhi. So he said once or twice, he said the family sent the youngest son, Vrindavan Chandraday, to come and live with me, even after I took sannyas. So I told him, all right, you can come as long as you live like a brahmachari. He said, so like this way, once, twice they were sending him, and I would say, no you don't, you go back. So the idea there was that the family couldn't accept that he'd taken sannyas. They still wanted to keep, this tendrils of attachment, family, this family consciousness that you're still the father, you're still the head, these are still your children. You're not going to get away with it just, declaring yourself as a sannyasi and walking away from everything. So, sending Vrindavan Chandra Day to live with Prabhupada after he took sannyas meant that that was one less mouth to feed at home. All right, let him go, all right, he's taken sannyas, but he's still your father, you still go to him, and he has to pay. But Prabhupada wasn't having anything to do with it, so he would send him back again. So it's not an easy thing, to take sannyas, even if you're qualified individually, but there's so many other factors that come in, to try to spoil it, and especially in Kali Yuga. But Prabhupada, of course, was very, advanced and very much aware of his relationship with his Guru and Krishna. And so despite all of these struggles with the family, he was able to actually successfully cut himself off. But even then, he did at one point buy a small flat for them in Calcutta, where they're still living, just so that they would be settled, not destitute, and also because then there couldn't be any criticism, as the leader of the Hare Krishna movement, that he's neglecting his former family. Anyway, so that's a few things about detachment. That's our whole goal in life, to become detached by cultivating our attachment for something superior. That means giving up our material limited relationships, but not so that we can just become one or void, or because that doesn't work either. Yeah, you realize, all right, your attachments in material life are causing so many problems, so you want to give it up. But if you don't have a positive alternative, then what will you do? You go and live in a cave in the Himalayas for some time, or advertise yourself as some kind of yogi. But the end result is that you come back down again to the material platform and engage in altruism or humanitarianism or whatever it is, because you cannot give up the need for relationship. That's the core of everybody's being, is that we're all related. So we can't give that up. So if we give up our material relationships, but we don't form bonds on the spiritual platform, then it will also fail. Real detachment means attachment to Krishna. And that we're getting automatically in ISKCON. So in that sense, the ISKCON society is already devised based on, the idea of Varnashram. In Varnashram, every member, whatever their status, are all headed for that ultimate goal of spiritual emancipation. Dharma, Karma, Dharma, Artha, Karma, Moksha. Everybody's headed for that moksha. So in our ISKCON society, although we may not have, you know, yet very distinguishable castes or varnas. Yeah, we've got some ashrams, but the varnas are not that clear at the moment. But even though we don't have that, the overall framework is the same as the varnashram system, that we're headed to detachment. Whether we're brahmacharis, grihastas, vanaprasthas or sannyasis, the goal is the same. And especially in the household community, we have to keep that before us, that, you know, this is an interim arrangement that we're in right now, but ultimately we want to come to a point where we're detached. And our ISKCON society is, you know, working on that basis for all the members of the society. We're all going towards this one point of complete detachment from material life and going back home, back to Godhead. So in that sense, we do have a Varnashram society or system. It's not well developed, but the fundamental principle on which it stands is there, and that's this renunciation, detachment from material life. Okay, it's getting late. Sorry, I've gone on a little bit. We'll finish at that point. You have a question, Prabhu?
Yeah, you mentioned your dear friend. I find myself in a similar situation, and I took it up with my spiritual master, and he said he can invite him to take prasadam to Govindas. The only way sometimes I associate with him is because I joined with his help, but he didn't. So I kind of owe him. But is there any question of friendship, or why do you? Because sometimes I feel like giving up altogether.
You can only be friends with an equal. You show mercy to those who are less advanced. You serve those who are more advanced, and you have friendship with those who are on the same level. So, like with my friend, I've known him since I was 5 years old. We went through all the stages of school together. We emigrated from England to Australia together. Then we parted company. But I've kept up the ties. Why? Because I'm practicing devotional service, at least to some degree. And I want him to always be conscious of that. He has some respect, at least, for the fact that I became a devotee. He knows that I did it very seriously. You know, it wasn't a whimsical thing, because he was with me when I was going through all the transformations that were necessary for me to come to the point where I could join. So he has respect. So I just, you know, I think that somehow or another, Krishna's put us in touch with each other, you know, in this great ocean of material existence. These two straws have come together for some time. So let me give that man some benefit. Why should my relationship with him not be productive? Let it be productive. If the relationship's there, all right, no problem. Give him Krishna prasadam, and that's the way that I engage him. When I go and see him, I just take him heaps of prasadam. He loves prasadam. That's what's going to save him. Otherwise, you know, he's completely attached to meat eating and all these intoxication and all these things. So, yeah, and when I go and talk with him, he never ever asks me, what are you doing now, where have you been, you know, what your activities are, because they can't relate, karmis can't relate to anything the devotees are doing. So, my family members, they never ask me, what are you doing? Never ever. They tell me everything that's happening with the family, but they never ask me, what are you doing? So I just say, yeah, Hare Krishna. So at least, you know, whenever I contact them, I put Hare Krishna. So they have to read the holy name. Yeah. When I ring up my mum's nice. She's 93 now. I'm going to see her next week. She's nice. When I ring her up, I say Hare Krishna. Oh, Hare Krishna. Yeah, and she's even chanted the whole Maha Mantra on the phone sometimes. So, you know, she's got a little bit of piety there. But the rest of my family members, if I say Hare Krishna, hi. How are you? If I'm lucky if they ask me how I am. You know, I mean, they're not inimical, but they just don't get it. So it's a question of showing a little bit of mercy. Somehow or another, we've come in contact with various people. They're not all spiritualists, but they can become so. That's the point. So why should our relationship with them be wasted? Let's do the maximum that we can to help them gradually this lifetime, next lifetime, you know, 3 or 4 lifetimes, but that little bit of spiritual contact that they've had, that will increase. And then eventually they'll come to a point where they'll also become devotees. Yeah. So that, at least that's my mood for it anyway. Any other questions or comments?
Considering that we all have an eternal relationship with Krishna, it seems to be logical then that at least those living entities who are in the same mood and have same ties, that they actually also have an eternal relationship with each other. You know?
Well, Prabhupada did say that we'll have another ISKCON in the spiritual world. Yeah, we're interacting with other living, you know, other living beings, but on the common platform of pleasing Krishna. So yeah, why should we assume that those relationships will be broken? But we won't be in these bodies. We'll be in some other form. We may not recognize, but it's just like, even by karmic action, you know, we get entangled. So we do things, then we're in the debt of another living being. We die or they die, so how you pay the debt? Your next lifetime you take a birth in such a way that you again meet, and then you have to pay the debt. So there's an entanglement that's going on. You know, so if that's true that it's going on materially from lifetime to lifetime, why not spiritually? Except with us, our next lifetime, hopefully, you know, will be eternal, and the relationships that we have. Now, we may not remember, you know, I met this person in my last lifetime and this was the exchange, but automatically by the force of nature, you meet that person again, they owe you or you owe them, so there's some instinct that comes, that's from the super soul and the demigods, that now you have to do this or now you have to do that because, you know, there's this hidden debt from previous lives. So you may not be aware of the, you know, original cause, but you feel a compulsion to be engaged with that person in this lifetime. And we're always meeting new people, so-called new people, but they're not necessarily all new. Some of them are, you know, we've got some business, unfinished business with them. So that's what keeps us entangled in the material world. Lifetime after lifetime, it's going on. Krishna consciousness severs those material bonds, but establishes real spiritual bonds. Those bonds are going to go on, you know. The association of devotees is all that we care about. That will go on beyond this body, so why not the same devotees that we've served with in this lifetime? But we may not recognize them, you know, in a particular form, but we'll get that connection again, that's for sure. Okay, we'll finish there. Srila Prabhupada ki.